Good morning and welcome to everyone who's here with us. My name is Maureen Tobin, and I am the Executive Director of the Davenport Institute of Public Engagement and Civic Leadership. And today we are here with ELGL. This is an ELGL webinar, and we're partnering with ELGL and Rock Solid. We're going to be talking about the past 2 years and reflecting on our virtual, hybrid, and in-person local government meetings, what that has been like, and some of the interesting challenges, the positive things that have happened, and where we're going, and then some interesting research that I'm very anxious to share with all of you through Rock Solid. ELGL is the Engaging Local Government Leaders Network. They engage the brightest minds in local government. One of the ways that they do this is to provide these exceptional and free online trainings and webinars about local government. The Davenport Institute has the mission of helping to build stronger communities by prompting public participation in local governments. And Rock Solid has a mission to provide software solutions that empower city and municipal leaders to digitally bridge the engagement gap between residents and their local government. So I think this is an awesome partnership between the three of us today. Very excited to be a part of it. We'll be saving the recording of today's webinar in the ELGL webinar library located on elgl.org. Your microphones and conference phones are muted, but you're welcome to comment and ask questions in the chat box, which will be available throughout the webinar. And I'm sure at this point in the game, we're all very familiar with this type of format. After we've finished the formal part of the presentation, we'll open it up for questions, and those can also be submitted through the chat. I'll ask those questions as they come in so that they will also live as a part of this recording and include the questions of all of you and our guests. Today's event, as I've already suggested, is about the past 2 years, and I think we've all had some interesting experiences. And without further ado, I think I'll go ahead and share with you first our 3 panelists from local government. We have Ardy Kassakhian. Ardy, did I pronounce that right?
Close enough.
I didn't. Say the correct pronunciation of your last name.
Kassakhian.
Kassakhian, and we practiced.
As long as you don't call me Kardashian, we'll
okay. And I did not. Thank you, Ardy, and I apologize. We did practice that beforehand, and I still mispronounce it. Ardy is currently the mayor of the city of Glendale, and so that's fun to have an elected official a part of this. But previous, he was the city clerk for the city of Glendale. So he brings a really interesting perspective to this conversation, and it'll be interesting to hear what Ardy has to share. Then we have Andrew Powers, the city manager for the city of Thousand Oaks. And I would be remiss if I didn't share that he's also an advisory council member for the Davenport Institute. And Drew has a background in communications within local government as well. So I think he also brings a very interesting perspective to the table. And last but certainly not least, Danielle Rogers from the city of Newton, Iowa, where she is the community marketing manager. And I just heard as we were getting started that Danielle has been dealing with a lot of natural disasters over the last year, in addition to everything COVID. So it'll be fun to hear from Danielle. And then we have Josh Hurni from Rock Solid, and we'll go into what Rock Solid has to share after we hear from our panelists. So I'm gonna just open it up with Ardy. If you could share a little bit about what the city of Glendale has been experiencing during the past 2 years, and where, what have you experienced with this whole virtual and hybrid meeting situation, and where are you all thinking you're heading towards the future?
Thank you, Maureen, and thank you to the Davenport Institute as well as to Rock Solid. I hope I'm speaking loud enough to be heard. I'm on the laptop, so I think the mic is working fine. I think "Can you hear me" has become the unofficial slogan of the COVID period, as we've all been having our meetings virtually and using the technology and tools available to us to reach out to our colleagues as well as to our constituents. And it's not something that I think any of us truly expected to be experiencing or becoming quite as adept at as we are now. Um, Now, it's not new technology. The technology has always been out there. The question was how we would use it, and necessity becomes is the mother of invention, correct? So once we went into lockdown and we still had to continue the business of governing a city, making sure our communities were safe, doing the best that we could with the information that we had, which these last 2 years have been very challenging. We were fortunate to have a number of tools at our disposal, including Zoom. Our city ended up using, I believe, WebEx and then Microsoft Teams. I think we probably at different times used every single tool available to us. And then I think finally settled on doing city council meetings via WebEx and, of course, streaming them live and using the tools that we were using previously to be able to engage our constituents. What has changed, and I think it's changed for the better, is that the ability to meet with people remotely has brought more people into the engagement process that otherwise may not have been. I mean, I know that council members, I know as city clerk, we would hear oftentimes meetings being scheduled at times that were inconvenient for people to be able to attend and participate in. And we certainly didn't have people calling in for public comment. It was you either showed up in person and you filled out a card or you didn't participate. Well, what's changed now is, oftentimes I feel like I'm a talk show host or a radio show host when it's time for public comment, and I say, "All right, caller, you're on. Please tell us what your concern is." It feels a little bit strange, but I think it's useful. We have to look at it from the perspective of the public, and I think that a lot of people appreciate this. So the question becomes, where do we go from here? Are we going to continue this? Or are we going to revert back to the old ways? And I think everyone is in agreement that what's going to emerge out of this is going to be a hybrid. I certainly would like to see a hybrid emerge because I think that anything that we can do that brings our constituents and stakeholders closer to the decision-making process, the better decisions we all can make. At the end of the day, many of us act as stewards of the public trust, right? We are representing constituent interests. And also as city clerks, as a previous city clerk, it was always my goal to see how we can get more people to understand how government works, why it sometimes doesn't work, because by nature it's designed to have friction and debate. That is part of the give and take, the back and forth of the decision-making process. And most importantly, what they can do as constituents to make it work the way they want it to, whether it's through the election process or participating in meetings, making their voices heard. So I think everything that has happened in COVID, I mean, there's been a lot of negative impacts to us as communities, certainly the impacts on health and the loss of life. But, out of it, we are gaining some important insight as to how to engage with people, with constituents. One of them is this closing the gap on this divide of participation through technology. And I'm actually very optimistic and excited about what the future holds. We will start with Zoom meetings, and who knows where we'll go from there. I would love to see the incorporation of online real-time polling on issues, people who are following the meetings. And I know that there's some platforms out there that have already, and cities that have already explored that. Using the integration of video technology as well as with the posting of the meetings. Before it was if you wanted to go back and find out what was discussed on a particular issue, to be able to find that specific portion of the meeting where that was discussed. I remember the days when I first started as city clerk. I was elected city clerk when I was, I think, 27 years old. And at that time, if you wanted a copy of a meeting, you had to come to City Hall, fill out a form in triplicate for a VHS tape. And then everyone was excited that you could actually order a DVD. And then very quickly, within a short period of time, technology made leaps and bounds, and we're here where now meetings are archived online. And now you can actually, we're using some platforms even search the audio and video, type in search terms and bring up portions of the meeting. So the sky's the limit. I'm excited about what the future holds. And, I think that it's incumbent on all of us as public servants to try and lean forward and figure out what's the next way we can bring in more people into the process.
Yeah, well, I love to hear your optimism, Ardy. That's wonderful, because I think, I mean, it's been a challenging couple of years for all of us, right? And it's great to be at this point and still feel optimistic about what is ahead. And certainly there are still challenges ahead too. I have a question related to you. How do you define hybrid? What's hybrid going to look like in the city of Glendale, California?
So I think we're probably in a hybrid mode right now, because as soon as I received both the vaccine and booster, I started coming back into council chambers, even though council chambers were not open to the public. And the reason I did that is because I felt that, I would not ask our staff or anyone else to do something that I was not willing to do myself. And so if our staff was expected to come in and service the public at the counters and make some of our divisions open, then as a person who's been elected and is perceived as a leader in the community, I have to do the same. So I started coming into council meetings. So there was a period when I would be the lone person on that horseshoe of the dais, while other people were still zooming in or calling in. But now, since as of 2 weeks ago, we've opened up City Hall on a limited basis. And so most of my colleagues are coming in. In fact, a few meetings, we've had all 5 of us around the dais along with staff. We still have some social distancing available in the council chambers for people to attend within their own comfort level. We have not had a lot of people attend meetings, so the meetings are not nearly as busy or crowded as before. But here is the hybrid model where it comes in. We're still under state orders that allow us to have remote meetings. If we wanted to, none of us would have to come in currently based on what our emergency orders are related to the pandemic. And as such, we've had a few meetings where, not necessarily, I think, for COVID reasons, but council members have had other boards or commission meetings and they've been elsewhere and they've been on their way to City Hall, and they'll call in. They'll call in and they're able to participate because of this emergency order that affords us that ability. So that, I think, is something that could continue. I know before, as city clerk, if you had a council member who wanted to call in on an important issue but was traveling, they had to go through this whole process of posting the agenda in the lobby of a hotel, making sure that it was outside their hotel room door, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Now, I think that people are able to participate from wherever they are. And I think we have not lost anything as a result of it by making the process for people to participate remotely easier. And so we've had a couple of meetings, as I mentioned, in terms of a hybrid so we are partially hybrid in terms of the council. Some of us are in chambers, some of us are calling in or zooming in remotely. I'll use Zoom as the term for video connecting remotely. And then our constituents are still calling in. I mean, for public comment, we have folks who will call in, who will be watching it from home and then hop on the phone. That's a little bit trickier, especially with some of the folks who still watch it on the cable access channel. And then you have to remind them, please turn down the volume. And then there's a little back and forth. And please don't stand so close to the TV or television set. But I think overall, we'll only get better and better at it.
Okay. Okay. And we have one question that popped in, but I think I'm going to hold that and jump over to Danielle so we can at least let all 3 of our panelists speak a bit before I jump into questions. Danielle, so you are the person outside of California in Iowa, the city of Newton. So tell us, how are things going there? And, where have you been? Where are you now? Where are you heading with your public meetings?
Yeah, so we shortly after everything started happening, our city council quickly was able to do Zoom meetings. That was our choice or product of choice throughout the pandemic, as well as all of our other boards and commissions were able to do Zoom meetings as well, based on our emergency proclamations from the governor's office. And we continue to do that throughout 2020 and most of 2021. Eventually in 2021, our council members started coming back to the council chambers and to the dais, but we were still providing Zoom as an option to take part in the meetings. Our staff was able to do that, as well as council members who may not have been comfortable or hadn't gotten the vaccine yet were able to do that. And then in January of this year, we actually kind of stopped using Zoom for the city council meetings. We're lucky. Newton is a town of 15,000 just outside of the Des Moines metro. And so we actually have a cable access channel. And stream our meetings live on our website. We were doing that before the pandemic. So we slowly kind of stopped doing Zoom for the council meetings, and people have started coming back to our council chambers for those in-person meetings. We still have some boards and commissions that are doing Zoom meetings, because it kind of came out of everything that it was a lot easier to get quorums for those committee meetings with different people's where they were working or what they were doing in their lives. They were better able to attend if they were able to do that through Zoom. And then we've also been working on a comprehensive plan update in the last year. And that the last time that was done was in 2012. So definitely a long time ago, but a lot of public meetings and stuff. And we've had to do a lot of thinking outside the box on how to get people to attend or even take part in our comprehensive plan update. And that's been a lot of doing smaller meetings, offering a lot of stuff online. We did some crowdsourcing maps. We used a tool called Mentimeter to be able to do some live surveying at events, and then just doing surveys electronically, and my coworker and I going to classrooms and actually working with our schools to make sure we could engage students as well as other entities throughout town, businesses and stuff, in ways that they were comfortable with to get the results we need to move forward with that. And so I think, one thing like I said, we're lucky that we were already streaming our meetings and had a cable access channel that a lot of our residents have access to. And so I think, moving forward, I think there's conversations happening about the hybrid and allowing people to call in and make comments, or if they're not able to come to a meeting. And so we're working through some of that, but it definitely kind of gave everyone a lot of problem solving skills in the last couple of years, thinking through different things. And when things were brought to our attention, how do we address that and make sure residents are able to take part in whatever way, shape, or form that they're comfortable with?
Yes. So Danielle, currently, can your residents still participate in meetings by Zoom, or not for city council anymore?
Not for our city council meetings. They are in person, and then they're streamed. So I think the majority of what we've heard is they're okay with that. Some of our commissions and boards, like I mentioned, are still via Zoom, and a lot of that at that level, there's still participation that way.
Okay. And you mentioned the process you're going through for your general plan update.
Yeah.
Is that including Zoom at all? Or just, you mentioned a lot of different ways you're trying to connect with residents, and it sounds like you really are exploring all kinds of possibilities.
Yeah, for sure. Early on, we were doing Zoom, but as restrictions and stuff loosened up here in Iowa, we found more people were wanting us to come to them instead of them coming to us. And so we found ways to make that work. And kind of, I think just the shift in people's perceptions and reactions to restrictions lifting, we've kind of just gone with the flow with what our residents are comfortable with.
Yeah. That sounds awesome. And from my perspective, that's so key, is that we're really paying attention to what is working best for our community members. And, what are they actually asking for? I will share a little, this was a safe space for some city managers, and I won't suggest where they were from or who they were, but they were talking about how much they loved Zoom because, of course, they can do it from the comfort of their home. And there's so much control when you're, from someone who focuses on how the importance of public engagement, I have to say I was a little bit afraid that we might be making choices to use Zoom because it's so much easier for us as staff and that we have more control and not looking at it through the lens of what's best for our residents. So thank you for.
Yeah, and just one kind of tied to that, one thing, a concern of our city council is we're close to the metro, but we're still dealing with kind of a broadband desert. Our internet connections aren't always great for our residents. So them trying to get on Zoom sometimes was difficult because we don't have really good internet in our community. We're working, through that process, but I think that was one of the decisions about going back to in-person meetings, was because there was a lot of concern about people's broadband or internet not being able to stream 2-hour meetings.
Yeah. Okay. And we're getting a couple more questions. I'm going to shift over to Drew Powers, the city manager in the city of Thousand Oaks, which is back in California again. So we're going to probably have another perspective there. Drew, go ahead. How are things going in Thousand Oaks, and where do you think this is heading for the future?
Well, thanks so much, Maureen and Kristen and everybody for joining us today. It's really a pleasure to be here and be part of the panel and this great discussion. I'm going to really focus on some of the best aspects, I think, that have emerged out of the last couple of years. We've all been in a place where I think we're familiar with why we had to do it. What I really want to focus on, and I try to keep my team focused on, is how do we maintain the best aspects of that as we move into the years ahead. And so my key takeaways really fall into 3 buckets. For us in Thousand Oaks, and for those that are not familiar, Thousand Oaks, a city of 130,000. We are in Ventura County, but we're right on the Los Angeles County line. And so it's a unique place in that regard. There's a lot of work that happens with folks leaving down into greater Los Angeles area. And then there is a strong life sciences community here and tech community in Thousand Oaks itself. So for us, the 3 big takeaways are better preparations, more diverse and enthusiastic participation, and more effective engagement. And I'm going to talk a little bit about each of those 3 areas. In terms of preparations, I think as most of you in local government know, preparing your council or board, committee, commission for upcoming hearings and meetings is an incredibly important aspect of the job. And so for us, we would always host one-on-one meetings. Those meetings would be in person very often. They would often run long, or someone would arrive late. We would bring different subject matter experts into those meetings. Utilization of new tools available to us now has allowed us to have those meetings and preparation meetings with our council members to be much more dynamic, much more intimate, and for me to bring in and out subject matter experts, sometimes consultants from other states, other areas, other professionals, and they dip into the meeting and out of the meeting as I manage the agenda and the preparations. And so we're able to share screens, we're able to go through budget numbers, we're able to show photos, maps, things in a very dynamic manner that help our council to be so much more prepared for hearings. It's been one of those unexpected takeaways that when you're sitting in a conference room and you're just talking, your levels of engagement are just different. And you wouldn't expect that to be the case when you're using a technology platform, but when they can actually get in and look at the screen and understand what's happening and hear from these experts. And we don't have to take as much time. My public works professionals can come in for 5 to 7 minutes, share their pieces of information, and then we rotate on to bring in the finance professionals in there. So it's really been fantastic that way. Much more intimate, much more informative dialogue with our electeds, and they've actually come out of it much more connected with members of our executive team and our city family. In terms of participation in public meetings, we've seen here in Thousand Oaks a much more diverse cross-section of participation. Most cities would have the frequent flyers. Those would show up at the meetings no matter what the agenda was. Some of those may be from the business community. Some of those may be sort of just ardent critics of different aspects. But we've seen an entire new cross-section of participation. And I think that's fantastic. As Maureen mentioned, I came at city management with a background in public affairs and communications. And so I love that, the fact that folks can easily jump into a meeting and participate and actually be able to be getting dinner ready for the family and working on some work of their own in their office and still be able to carve out the time to participate. Thousand Oaks is a city of over 50 square miles. And so it's not easy to hop in a car after the end of the day and come down to City Hall and take the time to participate. So affording that option to them has really been fantastic. We've seen a lot of people utilize that. And the level of enthusiasm and professionalism in a lot of the participation has been just great. We've seen an uptick, probably 20 to 30%. Not every meeting, but generally speaking, from where we were pre-COVID to where we were during the pandemic in terms of participation in our public meetings. We do allow public comment at the beginning, open-ended public comment, and we allow public comment under each individual agenda item. And so that can mean some longer meetings. It means that we have to, in certain times, we have to institute some policies where we change the timing configuration from a 3-minute to a 2-minute or a 1-minute, depending on when we have policies out, depending on the number of speakers that we have and the type of item that it is. It's also made us much better from a fiscal standpoint. We're not paying consultants that we're doing water rates or things like that to fly in or drive in and spend the night in the hotel. Those things where even when we've come back in person, as we are now, allowing them to participate in that manner is great. Including staff members that are maybe at a conference and would typically have to plan around that. They can now easily jump in and participate. The entire council has an iPad dedicated to Zoom on their dais. And so in a hybrid mode, which we're in now, we generally rotate. We'll do 10 speakers in person, 10 via Zoom, 10 in person, 10 via Zoom, and alternate back and forth in that manner. And so that has worked really well, and it's also had a fiscal benefit. And then finally, more effective engagement. We led through the pandemic a update to our general plan. We're still midstream in that, updating the city's comprehensive general plan. And so there's a lot of engagement that comes with the general plan update. And so there was some question whether we need to hit the pause button at the early stage of the pandemic. We decided just to lean into it fully, and we found that to be absolutely fantastic. We had robust participation in all of our meetings related to different elements of the general plan, and especially our land use element, which is always the element that gets the most attention to it. So we were able to host meetings where we brought in big cross-section of the community to participate. We used webinar format as we're using today, in that we had a general plan advisory committee that was kind of the lead stakeholders, and then we had everyone else in the webinar format. We also used the opportunity for creating town halls into community breakout rooms, real-time polling on items as we moved through that process. And what we found is just a tremendous level of engagement throughout that. And so it probably more so than we would have seen if we'd done the traditional workshops. The final thing I wanted to mention is the importance of keeping, I think, these tools, these technology tools that most of our community really loves and appreciates from our flexibility standpoint, but also pairing those when we begin to come back and return to in-person. And we had a workshop on a topic last week, and one of our first big return to in-person stakeholder events. And we had the previous events over the last year via Zoom, and to have those interactions and that warmth that was actually built via Zoom, and to see those people in person and the interactions that were happening both with city staff, but also with each of them. They've seen each other as boxes on a screen and now see each other in person. And then having our next meeting, that we're going to do that in Zoom and back and forth, and sort of the combination of that, the warmth that was developed through those meetings, really was fantastic to see. So those are my big takeaways. It's led to some better preparations, a lot more diverse and enthusiastic participation in general, and it's been a really effective overall engagement tool, even on some major big ticket items for local government.
Okay, well, thank you, Drew. That also sounds very optimistic and positive, the way you're framing everything up, and that's awesome and wonderful. As I said when Ardy was sharing too about the positive aspects and coming out of all of this, being very optimistic. I'm going to just ask these questions that have come up to the entire panel briefly and quickly before we move on to having Josh Hurni share survey results, because I think those are going to be really interesting to give an overall sense of what's happening across the country. But I don't want to lose sight of some of these questions. And if we can't do detailed answers on all of these, at least we will have spoken them, and maybe there's some information sharing that can happen in the background after this. But Jessica Vanderkolks is asking, and I'm going to put this to the whole panel, do you use a particular service for your call-in public comment? That came up while Ardy was speaking.
So at the beginning for Thousand Oaks, at the beginning of our time, we recognized that this was going to be a real challenge. We actually purchased was essentially a radio call-in board that some of our IT folks manage. I have the benefit of running two theaters here, and our council chambers doubles as a theater as well. So I have a team, not just in IT, but I have a team that works in the cultural arts and theater space. So I've got that unique functionality, and so we have it patched in through our phone system here, and so we manage those calls. I saw there was another question about accessibility for those that can't use Zoom, and that's why you have to have the phone option. Really, if you're going to go hybrid, from an equity standpoint, I think it only makes sense to have the phone component as well. And so we've provided that. It's not utilized a ton, but that's how we handle it.
Okay. And Ardy, since this came up during your comments.
Well, so we, much like what Drew said, we use the tools that we already have available. We have our own television station and program that we use, that we used to air out our meetings in. And when we weren't airing our meetings and board and commission meetings, we would air different television programs that actually had call-ins from the audience. So they would air live. And so we are using the tools available to us through our television programming station division, and they are the ones that are patching through those telephone calls. How it exactly connects to the chambers, or I don't believe it's necessarily integrated into the program. It's what it is. It's independent. It would have been whatever program that we're using to stream, and as I mentioned in our case, it's via WebEx. And it would still be the same because it's just audio within the council chambers, people calling into a phone number that's dedicated to that. So, certainly it hasn't been nothing that I think the most important thing to remember in all of this is that nothing is perfect. There is always room for improvement. It's trial and error. As I mentioned, we use WebEx for our meetings that we run through our boards, commissions, council, and housing authority. But internally, our staff uses Microsoft Teams for their collaboration. So, different strokes for different folks, whatever works for you and for what task you have at hand. I think that's the key to remember, and to be the one thing that I believe that we need to keep in mind is we need to be flexible. We need to be able to adapt.
Absolutely. Danielle, did you have anything to add to that question?
We just used Zoom and telephone, and we're lucky that we have a city clerk, but then we have 3 deputy city clerks that were able to kind of manage that and manage the people calling in and the Zoom meetings during the meeting. So
Okay. Okay.
Maureen, if I could just interject here real quick.
Yeah.
Based on the survey results that we got, it looked like about 70% of the people were using Zoom webinar for their, I have this in the slide, but just to kind of put a data point on that, it seemed
Yeah,
like the majority of
great.
people.
And Maureen, if I could just add, I want to also mention that, so in addition to my role on the council, I also teach at the local community college. So our community college is all Zoom. And I teach a political science course, and all of the instructors, all the students have become very used to using Zoom and using the different educational tools. And you know, anything that we're doing isn't necessarily new, it's just new to government. I completed my master's in public policy and public administration through Northwestern University. And it was a, you know, what we would refer to as, I guess, a correspondence course or online degree. You know, when I was first coming out of college, my undergrad, and if you had told me that we would be doing master's degrees or even doctorates online, most people would have raised an eyebrow and look at you funny about, you know, what is the validity of that? How serious can you take a degree that's conferred remotely? But I can tell you, having participated in a master's program that was remote through a university like Northwestern, and having done an undergraduate that was obviously in person, I didn't feel that I lacked in anything in the completion of a degree and participating and collaborating online. I think it's a great tool for many, many things. And I think it's great that it's now finally being adopted by local governments and agencies.
Okay. You know, I am going to just go back and have Josh present first so that we don't end up running out of time for Josh to share the important information that Rock Solid has to share about all of this through a survey of government leaders, kind of looking at best practices in this whole environment. So Josh, if you would go ahead and share with us, and when you're finished presenting, we'll go through all of the questions.
Yeah, thank you. Really excited to share these survey results. As you mentioned, Rock Solid is focused on managing the public meeting process. We have been involved in various other companies that have been doing this for over 20 years, and so have a lot of experience in terms of actually, the first company we started, they were the first to live stream video 20 years ago. So it's something we've been very familiar with for a long time. And it was kind of interesting. So when COVID hit, we were actually already scheduled to speak at the International Municipal Clerks Conference, and then COVID hit. And so we pivoted on what our presentation was going to be to doing virtual meetings. And we had about 2,000 attendees sign up for that. And this was in May of 2020 when nobody really knew kind of what to do. So the timing was very fortuitous. And at that point, we kind of rushed out a solution that integrated with Zoom. But anyways, so that's a little bit about kind of our involvement in the early days. And so what happened was, a year later, I thought, let's find out where people are. You know, let's get a temperature check on what people have been doing over this last year, all the lessons learned. And so what we did is we sent out surveys to city clerks. We sent surveys to the entire list of the people who attended that webinar. And then also we had another database with city managers. And so, you know, these were the, this here, first of all, is just kind of a breakdown of the respondents in terms of populations of cities. And so I'll just jump right into the findings here. And so first, just to talk very briefly about the technology, this is what I had mentioned, where roughly 70% were using a Zoom, either Zoom or Zoom webinar for their meetings. I think that really became, especially Zoom webinar, really became kind of the go-to solution for most places. You can see there are a few other ones like Microsoft Teams and GoToMeeting, and then some specific ones that were specifically designed for government. Another result that I thought was really interesting was what are some of the biggest challenges that people faced. And so the biggest challenge that people noted, and I should say, I think it said it on the last slide, but this survey went out last June, so June 2021. So that was right when, just some context around that. That was right when vaccines were, pretty available for the first round, and people were really starting to go in to the chambers again. I think there was kind of that optimism before, the Delta and Omicron variants. And so I think it would be interesting to run this survey again and kind of see how the results had changed. But at this time, essentially a year ago, the biggest challenge that people had was implementing the new technology. And then a second one was really kind of managing those meetings. So making sure people didn't talk over each other, how you took people in order. And we've been able to build some solutions that have really helped kind of manage that process there. And so that's a little bit about the technology. And then getting into the impact. And so what we saw from the survey results is that nearly 70% of people saw that they have, seen an increase in participation. So really in line with what, Ardy, Andrew, and everybody had been saying about that. And then some other data points that are not on this slide, but the way that participation has increased. So 57% saw an increase in public comments during that time. I saw one of the questions, just to address it, was how do people take public comments? And I've heard a lot of different ways that people are doing this, So some people are just, will have like a web form on their website where people submit comments. That can be very challenging to manage for clerks, because you're getting emails, you're getting forms that people are filling out, and so that can be very complicated. So what we've done is we've built some, I don't want to go too much into our product, but just to say that there are tools out there, I guess, where you can comment specifically on agenda items and have that go into a report. So there are ways that you can automate that process and make that much easier. Other ways that people saw participation was people asking more questions on virtual platforms. So that was 23%. And then around 6% saw an increase in the number of votes cast when meetings were held virtually. So there are tools out there so elected officials can actually vote remotely, which is pretty interesting, which is a really big change for people. We had a special district that had 31 people voting remotely at one time. So that was pretty exciting. One thing I did want to note is, the perspectives here are primarily from, cities, at least on the panel. And one thing that I have heard also working with counties about virtual meetings has been really powerful for them because they're so geographically dispersed, right? And so if you have a large county, it becomes very difficult for someone to come to a meeting that's all the way, that could be hundreds of miles away. And so I think particularly around counties, their virtual meetings will stay. And then also around like public hearings, I've also heard a lot from counties about lowering the costs, where I think Andrew kind of talked about that, where you're flying in consultants, legal counsel, and that sort of thing. And that can be very expensive.
Yep.
So yeah, so that's a little bit there. And then kind of getting into continuing on this line, increased diversity in terms of representation. So one of the key things we found is that the age of the attendees really increased. So they saw, people saw a 72% increase in age diversity. So, and I think a lot of that has also come back to what people were saying is getting to meetings can be very challenging, especially, you know, I have young children, you know, I would have to, I get one date night a month. Sorry, Ardy, I'm not going to the city council meeting, you know, on my date night. So, you know, it is nice to be able to hop into that meeting, make your comments and have those be heard. You know, also increase in diversity around race and ethnicity. And then I won't go through these signs, everything here, but basically you can see that it did increase access for people. One of the things that, and this may be actually kind of a question for the board or for the panel is, although one of the survey results was that although it did increase access and more diversity, the respondents felt that it didn't actually represent the community more. So I'm not sure, you know, it's always hard on a survey to get kind of, you know, more comments in there, but they felt like more people were attending, but it also felt like they weren't necessarily representing the whole community. And so I don't know if Ardy or Andrew you have, or Danielle, any kind of idea about maybe why that would be?
I'll just jump in and say I think that's a general challenge of overall civic participation across the country, even pre-pandemic and pre-hybrid or digital meetings, video meetings. I think it has more to do with where we are in terms of understanding how civics works and what people's role in it is. And, you know, quite honestly, in local government, people mostly get engaged. To say that it's reflective of the community, you know, how do you really gauge that? Because a lot of times engagement is based on specific issues that impact an area, a neighborhood. Rarely do folks get, do you get participate? If you're doing things well, right, most people are at an arm's distance from City Hall. If your electricity comes on, if your hot water and cold water work, no one decides to come by and thank the folks at City Hall for the great start to their day. But if the trash doesn't get picked up in on a specific street or something, then you get a flood of telephone calls, or if the power goes out. So it's hard. I don't know. I don't know how you gauge that, and if that's necessarily always the best indicator. I think that one of the things that we have done in Glendale is that we do a periodic quality of life survey. We do it online, we do it by telephone, and that way we actually proactively go out to the community and try to get a sample of everyone to see how we're doing on our key performance indicators. And that's how we try to gauge or capture all the folks that represent or make up our community by demographic, age, gender, ethnicity, etc.
Yeah.
I'll just add to that. We've had a bit of a different experience locally, and I think it's more of a product of the fact that we've been engaged in our general plan update, because that tends to spark interest in a broad cross section of the community. And so we have seen a change in the representation of the folks that are spending time engaging on different issues and topics on the general plan specific, but also on other development proposals and things that are coming before the city council.
Yeah. Josh, I'm going to just jump in here, and I want to make sure that you get to share everything you have to share. How many more slides do you have? I don't want us to run out of time here.
Yeah, and actually, really, I just had one other kind of data point that I wanted to kind of highlight, which was that about 25% of respondents felt that the virtual meetings had increased trust in their local government. So they are feeling that it is increasing that connection. And then I'm not seeing the number right in front of me, but also they saw an increase in how that was influencing the vote, the decision-making process. Like they felt that overall greater citizen engagement, like people were coming with comments that were useful for the decision-making process, not just coming and complaining about things or kind of venting, but really actually adding value, which I think can be one of the biggest challenges in citizen participation is how do you find those stakeholders in the community that have that subject matter expertise, get them involved, and so that you can really leverage the wealth of knowledge that you have in communities. And it does sound like from the survey that the virtual meetings have been able to tap into that a little bit.
Okay. I'm going to just ask you too, Josh, because we're getting lots of questions. Are you going to put a link to the survey into the chat, or how do people access?
Yeah, I'll put a link to this. Yeah, absolutely. I'll put a link. We have this on our website where they can download the report, and then yeah, I'll put that in the chat bar.
Okay, wonderful, because that was several questions in there. How do we get a copy of the survey? How can I find out more about it? Even how can I share this with my council?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, I'm going to quickly then jump back to our questions and see if we can get through hopefully a majority of these before the end of our time. I think what we're seeing here is this is, this continues to be kind of the topic of the hour. Everybody is still looking at this and how it all works and how we move forward with it. So going back to our questions, there's a comment here with a question at the end. I work with a school board that has also used cable access broadcasting. Our challenge is that the Zoom audio technology does not cooperate well with older broadcasting equipment. I experienced that too. We have a state law requiring the public to have electronic access to our meetings, even if hybrid. We are trying to figure out how to make the call-in thing work technologically. All on Zoom works and hybrid doesn't? Question mark? Any comments on that? I think it's kind of.
I think there's some technical issues wrapped up in that question that only the folks there on the ground could really answer. The good news is that there are companies out there that are able to come in and advise you, and you just have to find the one that works best for you. That's what an RFP is for, I suppose. But don't be deterred by the immediate challenges. There are a number of folks that can come in and help you out, and look at what some of the neighboring, if you're a school district and you have some issues, see what the city within which your school district is doing, or what the county is doing, or whatever other agencies are doing. Exchange of ideas and information will really help you give some ideas to move you forward.
Yeah, really good recommendation.
I'll Maureen, if I might, I was gonna just offer up, I think one of the key components that we've seen is practicing. We've done mock meetings. Every time we've tried to input a new piece of technology, we'll actually bring a team down and actually run through the paces of it. And you can't do that enough, because whenever you get into the moment, it's extremely difficult. And even workshopping what happens when you have a technical glitch and how are you going to manage those types of situations. So you can't underestimate the importance of that in a hybrid space, because it is very different.
Yeah, and the last thing I would say, just in terms of federal funding with the ARPA financing, a lot of people have been able to use some of those funding in order to upgrade their equipment and that sort of thing, because I know that can be
excellent point on that. Is there one person who's running both virtual and in-person components of a hybrid meeting?
Like I mentioned, we had our city clerk who was doing kind of the in-person stuff, but we have an IT support specialist and a couple of deputy city clerks that were handling the virtual aspect of our meetings. And then with our boards and commissions, usually there's a lead staff member kind of in the in-person and potentially another staff member helping with the hybrid part of it.
Yeah, okay. And I think it varies from location to location and depending on what your actual resources are. Question here, how does hybrid meeting impact the Open Public Meeting Act? And that may be a bit different from state to state. Any comments from our panel on that?
Well, there's certainly some components, and it does vary state to state, and some of it has been updated by the state of California. For instance, we do make a last call at the end of when we're in either an all Zoom or in a hybrid space to make sure we don't have any other last minute call-ins or Zoom ins. So we have the mayor actually affirmatively state that and the clerk indicates that we don't have any others and those types of things. I would just say we have been vocal about advocating for continued flexibility with modifications to the Brown Act as it relates to council member participation virtually. Right now, it's either kind of the way it stands is you're either all virtual and that's all of your meetings, your committees, commissions, boards, and everything, or you're back in person on the dais, and not a lot of flexibility aside from the traditional spaces where someone has to post up in their hotel room if they're going to participate remotely and so on, which is not really that realistic. And so we'd like to see some of that flexibility. I know there's some concern that maybe certain elected officials would use that to hide behind and not participate on dais, but managing meetings in this day and age with people that have busy work schedules and travel and conferences and things, it would be nice to have that flexibility. I'm dealing with one coming up for this summer right now, and if I could have that one member participate virtually, we could keep the meeting going. But since we can't do that right now, it's a challenge. So I would love to see that flexibility added in California down the line.
Yeah. As I'm looking through we've got a lot of comments relating to this and relating to open meeting acts and so forth. And I would just suggest to people who are making comments and wanting to know how other agencies are doing this is, connect here through the chat if you can. Definitely, connect with your peers across the country. Probably most helpful though within your state. Because each state has different requirements related to this. Let's see here. More on live streaming. What tools, resources, training were most helpful in getting you and your staff prepared for virtual engagement? And we only have 2 minutes left here. Do we have any flexibility on that with our panel? And I guess I am looking for a response from our ELGL friends as the ones actually hosting this.
We can go as long as we would like. And I just want to make sure we're making good use of our panelists' time though. And we will have this recording. We will share follow-up and contact information on LinkedIn. So if folks do have to hop off, we'll still make sure you're able to stay connected with this amazing team.
Thank you, Kirsten. Thank you. I'm really seeing though, this is an important topic.
Maureen, let me just hop on really quickly and just say that obviously my background changed because this is a perfect example that none of these processes are perfect. I thought my laptop was plugged in and it ran out of power and I got booted out of the Zoom meeting, and you pivot, you adjust, you come back in. I'm sitting here in a different office at a charging dock. In terms of training, anyone who had kids that was going to school remotely during COVID can tell you that if my son, who started kindergarten over Zoom, can figure it out, and he's now better at a lot of this than I am, then certainly we can as well. Folks are adaptable. They will adapt to these changes. In terms of tools that are available, again, I would recommend all of these different email groups and chats that different professionals have, whether it's city managers, city clerks. Take advantage of what other folks are doing and learning from them. And yeah, we'll get through this. This is it'll be bumpy, but it's worth the ride.
Thank you so much, Ardy.
And Maureen, I'm gonna have to pop off here in just a minute, so I just wanted to chime in again on that topic that very similar to what Ardy shared. Using the resources in your various county groups, I think, is critical. We really tried to stand up a series of groups to help all the cities in Ventura County work through the common issues that we were all facing. And then working with the third-party providers and whoever provides your streaming and provides your agenda management, and trying to work with large companies like Zoom to encourage additional functionality and changes to those tools, I think has been really helpful for us. It doesn't move at the pace you'd always like to see it move, as opposed to some of the government-focused tech companies. But by and large, I think everybody's willingness to continue to document what the needs are and try to work with think tanks and others in local government to continue down the path on this, I think, is what's really important.
Thank you so much, Drew. It is 11:01 here. And so I've scrolled through all the comments and questions. I am going to suggest that at the bottom, there's several helpful links. And we've so appreciated the time of our panelists and Josh from Rock Solid. And I really appreciate the information from that survey. I think all of you have offered some comments that suggest things are hopeful as we look ahead. There's going to continue to be challenges, as there always are, but I think we've all learned how to be creative and flexible. And this new environment, we have some new tools, and we just continue to pay attention to what is working best in our communities and how to best meet those needs. So thank you so much to everyone for being here today. As Kirsten from ELGL shared, this information will be shared back with you if you are registered for this webinar. And it's making my brain spin a bit about some resources that maybe the Davenport Institute and others could partner together to provide out to the greater good here. So thank you so much. And with that, I think I'll bring this to a close.
Thank you. Great job, everyone.
Thank you.